Hello to all my friends at the Langenfeld Foundation dinner to benefit wounded soldiers. I think you all know I would much rather be with you in person. But we have a lot going on, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak with you today by video and to express my sincere gratitude to all the veterans that are there for your extraordinary service and your sacrifice to our nation. No matter which service you belong to, no matter where you served, and no matter what conflict you fought in, you have all made tremendous sacrifices to keep our nation strong and free, and we are all deeply indebted to you. I also want to thank your families for the love and support they give you. Minnesota is a state where we wrap our arms around those who serve and sacrifice, and I want to thank the Langenfeld Foundation for your inspiring efforts to support our injured veterans. I also want to acknowledge Congressman Klein. I know he's one of your featured speakers tonight, and as you all know, he is a distinguished veteran himself. He and I have worked together on a number of issues for the Guard and Reserve and our active duty soldiers in Minnesota. This isn't a partisan issue. We work together. A few months ago, I had the privilege of visiting Vietnam with Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham. It's something that I will never forget. We visited the lake where Senator McCain had been shot down. We visited the cell block where he had been held in captivity for 5.5 years. As you know, Senator McCain has come back to Vietnam many, many times. And he's something of a rock star there because they know that he comes because he's interested in improving the relations in our country. So there we are walking around the prison, and we have 100 media behind us there to see him. And we have this very sweet Vietnamese guide, and she comes to this, and she's, you know, the communists are still in power there, and there's a picture, this big blown-up picture of GIs in captivity, and there's some with Christmas trees, there's some playing chess, some playing volleyball, and McCain kept whispering to me, "I don't quite remember that. I don't quite remember that." But what I took away most of all from that trip was that incredible sense of duty that Senator McCain has to our country and to the values that make our country great. And you all have that sense of duty too. Every man or woman who's been in uniform shares that sense of duty. I know Congressman Klein does, and I know all the veterans here tonight do as well. I've seen our soldiers' commitment to our country firsthand when I had the privilege of going to Iraq and meeting with many of them. I can tell you they didn't complain about the heat or the equipment or the food. I just heard two things. The first is who's winning the state hockey tournament. It was in March. And the second was, could I call and let their families know that they're okay? And I can tell you, I talked to a lot of moms when I got back to Minnesota, and you heard about the sacrifices their families had made. From the ridges of Gettysburg to the beaches of Normandy, from the hills of Korea to the jungles of Vietnam, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the sands of Iraq, Minnesota soldiers have made our state proud. Just as they have fulfilled their duty, so must we. Our country has a responsibility to do right by our soldiers and our veterans, just as each one of you has done right by our nation. When we ask our young men and women to fight and to die for this nation, to get injured fighting for freedom, we make a promise that we will give them all the resources they need to do their job. And we also make a promise that when they get home, we will take care of them. When they signed up for war, there wasn't a waiting line. And when they come back to the United States of America, especially if they're injured and they need health care, they need a job, they need to get an education, there shouldn't be a waiting line here. And that's what's so great about the work that the Langenfeld Foundation does. To truly honor our men and women who have served, our nation must continue to fulfill its obligation to all of our veterans, whether they completed their service last year or decades ago. In Washington, I'm committed to make sure that our nation does better by our veterans. In recent years, Congress gave the greatest increase to veterans funding in the history of the United States. That was during the last 2 years, including new funding for soldiers' Medicare. Last year, we passed the GI Bill for the 21st century. It was the right thing to do, and it was long overdue, because when our soldiers fought for us and they come home, as I said, they shouldn't be waiting in a line. We also passed wounded warrior legislation to make sure our injured veterans get the best care possible from the battlefield to when they return home. And we increased funding for research and treatment of traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder, the signature physical and mental injuries of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Finally, we expanded Minnesota's pioneering Beyond the Yellow Ribbon program. That's something we did with Congressman Klein and Congressman Walz, as well as Senator Coleman, and I headed it up in the Senate. The idea is to expand this program, not just in Minnesota. We worked with the senators from Georgia, and we work with people all over our country. We must continue our efforts to ensure that all our nation's soldiers and veterans and their families get the care that they need. I'll end with this story. One time I stayed on a Friday night in Washington to speak to some of our returning World War II veterans that were there to see the monuments. And the next morning I took the first plane home to Minnesota, and it leaves at like 6 in the morning, and I was crabby and tired, and I'm sitting there with my coffee in Reagan National Airport reading the paper, and all of a sudden all the travelers, all of whom were tired and there early, were standing and clapping. And I thought, who could be here? You know, what's going on that this whole airport of tired people standing up and clapping and cheering? And so I got up and I looked, and it was a group of World War II veterans. They had been coming back again with one of these honor flights to see the World War II monument and to be together. And every single one of them, they were from Detroit, were in wheelchairs, and they were being wheeled off. And all of a sudden, spontaneously, everyone in that airport stood and applauded. And as those guys were being wheeled off, there was not a dry eye on any of them. And I thought to myself at that moment, we've got to treat all our veterans this way every day. Tonight we recognize all the service members who have sacrificed on our behalf. They have built and protected America's greatness. In turn, we are truly a grateful nation. To all the veterans, thank you for your honor and your heroism, and for your duty and for your dedication. May we always remember and remain grateful to you. And all of you have made America safe and strong. Thank you. Thank you to the Foundation. Enjoy your evening.